So I finally bothered to watch Halo Season 2. I was not impressed. Despite all the baffling issues such as
Somehow Maki returned.
the Spartan 3s looking like they're about to go fight in the Clone Wars, and making the Flood look like generic zombies, the most annoying part is seeing people justifying how the Fall of Reach lasts only slightly longer than a single episode, purely because of how few chapters it has in the Fall of Reach novel. However, this is far from an accurate comparison, as I will explain in this video. Before discussing the actual presentation of Fall of Reach in Halo's novels, let's just address the elephant in the room. Yes, the chapters that cover the battle in its main appearances do only make up a small amount of each book, and it's not until Halo First Strike where the events on the planet's surface even appear, which only features in the early chapters. However, this is mainly because Fall of Reach was the first major piece of Halo content, and thus it had a lot to establish, while the main aspect of Halo First Strike is establishing how Master Chief and Cortana got from the remains of the Halo Ring to Earth between games, along with Johnson, but since it was released before Halo 2, no one would have known that he would become a main character in the rest of the trilogy. In comparison, it took until the second season of the Halo show for the events to happen, due to the show seemingly wanting to split its focus between multiple aspects of Halo's lore, inventing its own lore, and simultaneously being confused about which franchise they were working on, which led to the Human Covenant War inadvertently becoming a background detail at times, and coming across as just one of several things that humanity has to deal with in the Halo franchise. Back to the actual appearance in the novels, when the battle eventually does happen, it lasts mere hours, with over 300 ships on the Covenant side alone. Despite being outnumbered vastly, Reach's defence initially went well due to the presence of mech platforms similar to those later seen in Halo 2, only for the Covenant to retreat as a cover for ground forces, which then forces the Master Chief to conduct a mission to protect the location of Earth, which combines with Reach each to display the state that humanity is in this point of the Halo universe, while most of the Spartans deploy to the surface to defend key locations, which is primarily used to set up the Last Spartan aspect of Halo Combat Evolved in the original book, by having Keys immediately abandon them once the Chief is back on the Pillar of Autumn, along with leaving the Spartans with Chief to drift in space or get hit with multiple rounds of plasma. Thus, the ground part of the battle wasn't expanded on until the release of Halo First Strike, with the battle going to hell almost immediately after the Spartans deployed, with the Pelican losing its cockpit and entering the atmosphere in pieces and on fire, which forced the Spartans to jump from orbit and recreate Master Chief's fall from space, and with some of them failing miserably. Then once they are on the surface, the Spartans are slowly divided and picked off, with less than a dozen of the 25 Spartans present for the battle all being able to escape Reach in First Strike, although it is possible, or even likely, that some of the Spartans that are left unidentified in the book also escaped the planet due to the presence of Spartans after its fall, but that's a topic for another video. The book's interpretation of the space battle also involves a longer-range Covenant ship, which was seemingly never seen again in Halo lore despite it being super effective in this story until it gets destroyed, which only happens as a result of the combination of the 26th century humanity's most advanced smart AI and one of its most skilled captains, which reinforces how capable Keyes is after the sequences based around the Sigma Arcturus 4 space battle earlier in the book. However, one detail I find odd is how, as an extension of the book's idea that elites weren't encountered by humanity until the final years of the Human Covenant War, which quickly got retconned, Master Chief found himself having issues defeating a random elite during his and Blue Team's mission during the battle. In the games, Reach has always held some degree of importance to the story. Within the first cutscene of Combat Evolved, it gets a named reference, and the context to it makes the situation clear to the player. The ship's crew arrived at the Halo Ring as a desperate escape from some form of battle, only for their enemy to not only have followed their FTL jump, but also have beaten them to the destination as a result of better technology, which helps show the distinction between the two factions, which is later reinforced in gameplay with the differences between the humans aboard the ship using armour and equipment inspired by real life, while the aliens of the Covenant use plasma weapons and energy shields, both of which appear commonly in sci-fi. Meanwhile, in Halo 2, Reach is not only used to link its new Arbiter character to the wider universe by establishing that he was one of the Covenant leaders at the planet when it fell, and the one who followed the Pillar of Autumn to the first Halo, in turn making him the off-screen counterpart to Keyes as the one commanding the enemy force that the player encountered in the first game. Along with this, Reach is referenced to provide context to the opening conflict in the story, when Hood states that the Covenant fleet at Reach was
50 times this size.
Even though this was a severe over-exaggeration, as the book specifies that there were just over 300 Covenant ships at Reach. This continues in the background of the Halo trilogy and ODST as an extension of the desperation of humanity's situation, since as far as the games are concerned, Earth was the only significant planet that had not been destroyed by the Covenant. As a result of all this, Reach may have been an inevitable setting for Bungie's final Halo game, regardless of whether it fitted in with the novel or not. When the game first released, the basis of Reach's fall was a stretched-out campaign of defence with the Spartans of Noble Team at the head of it. As much as I like Halo Reach, and even the gameplay of the first mission, I don't think that the story gets off to the best start, given how it's not until the appearance of the elite zealots and the ending cutscene before any of the characters actually sound concerned about humanity's greatest enemy being on their second most important planet. Especially with that one guy who sounds like he was falling asleep in the recording booth about midway through the mission.
We were attacked by Covenant forces. The Covenant is on Reach. I repeat, the Covenant is on Reach.
With the Spartans, it's at least natural that they would have more restrained reactions to the events, but Emil seems way too casual in his line of dialogue, given what the context of an alien presence on Reach means to the faction. As the first half of the campaign progresses, there is a steady sense of escalation for the overall battle, even if it didn't fit with the traditional way that the Covenant had been presented in the early novels, or with the initial version of Reach's fall. With the first mission being the discovery of the Covenant, the second defending an important location in the form of sword-based from a small all-ground assault, at least in comparison to the later battles. The third being a recon mission in preparation for the fourth, which becomes the main counter against the Covenant's presence on the planet. After the long night of solace emerges at the end of Tip of the Spear, the turning point emerges with the mission of the same name for various reasons. It is the only time the player leaves the planet in Halo Reach, it's the first form of space combat in Halo, which is a pain on Legendary, and it ends with the first loss of Noble Team, with George 052, the lone Spartan and 2 of the team, sacrificing himself to save both his literal and metaphorical homeworld. Only for dozens of Covenant ships to emerge from slipspace mere seconds later, essentially nullifying his sacrifice in a bittersweet moment of irony. Along with this moment is the point where Reach's fall becomes a when, not if, type of situation. Along with this, it was retroactively referenced that the Long Night of Solace could have been a perfect fit for the ship that the Spartan 2s would need to use for their mission if Red Flag had been ready earlier, or if Noble Team hadn't conducted their own mission to destroy it. As things stand, even though it makes no sense that the battle remains hidden afterwards, the end cutscene of the level is one of the best in the game, and potentially of Halo. As a fix for how it would fit into the wider canon, it could be argued that the human ships reinforcing the planet, as referenced in the opening cutscene, arrived later, and forced the Covenant to disperse across the system to less well-defended planets, as seen in stories such as Stomping on the Heels of a Fuss, or in map descriptions such as one set on Tribute. Then have the presence of troops and ships in later missions be explained as being a small number of bold ship masters or fleet masters remaining at Reach in attempts to take it. Either that or those were from the original fleet. Then once the two of my favourite missions in the game, in the running for top 3 alongside Tip of the Spear, are Exodus and New Alexandria, both of which demonstrate how badly the conflict was going for humanity. something that wasn't exactly a focus until Halo 3 ODST. With this sense of foreboding existing in both gameplay and cutscenes, with one of the most atmospheric cutscenes in Reach being the opening of New Alexandria, where Noble 6 is just sat in a pelican looking out at the destruction and fire of the city around them, with the animations conveying the body language of the Spartans' mindset considering whether the planet is already lost, a sentiment that later emerges in the last cutscene of the mission, with Carter and Kat discussing.
You didn't answer my question.
You want to know if we're losing?
I know we're losing. I want to know if we've lost.
Or before returning to the stoic posture that he had displayed throughout the entire game upon preparing to reunite with Carter and Noble Team, ready for the next mission. The gameplay moments that show humanity's desperation and hopelessness the best are the Falcon journey between gameplay segments in Exodus and the glassing beams in the skybox of the following mission, which also foreshadows the fate of Kat at the end of the mission, given how it is the impact of a Covenant glassing beam which allowed an elite to pull off a move that only a Halo 2 legendary Jackal sniper could do under normal circumstances. Along with this, much of the content of these missions help add a sense of what the conflict would be like for those who weren't Spartans, and how scary many Covenant species, especially the brutes, would be to ordinary people, which are perspectives that were often lost in the Halo trilogy, given how few moments of genuine loss there were in each game. Because of this, I feel that these missions were the perfect points to introduce the brutes to the game, even though the Reach version of brutes are commonly seen as the worst in terms of gameplay, and their presence just feels like they were included in the game for the sake of it, as their natural traits in the lore make them the obvious choice for sequences in Exodus. Finally, Pillar of Autumn brings the series full circle as the remaining members of Noble Team race to the ship that started the games. At this point, the planet has already fallen, and the level is simply a race against time, one which the Spartans arguably lose, as even though they complete their objective, they're forced to remain on the planet to defend humanity's last hope as it escapes the planet, leaving Noble 6 to fight in a last stand, surrounded by the bodies of fallen Spartans and Marines, with his only remaining choice being to take down as many Covenant as possible before his inevitable fate of being overwhelmed by seemingly endless hordes of Covenant. Right, before I start hating the TV show, I will admit that Season 2 did some stuff well. The sequences on Sanctuary displayed what last-minute evacuations from Covenant invasions may have looked like in the main timeline, with the final parts reminding me of Exodus from Halo Reach. The animations on the elites look really good, which makes me annoyed that the writers felt the need to add a human villain to the show. The large-scale Forerunner architecture looks great in live action, and is the only part of the show that I liked without any caveats, and the initial space sequence in the finale was well shot and conveyed the chaos of that battle. Prior to Season 2, a major piece of the marketing was Reach's fall, with the main trailer focusing on aspects that were interpreted and theorised to be part of that plotline, while also having at least one poster have the tagline, "Rise from the Fall." Yet, after all the build-up and the cliffhanger of Episode 3, the event lasts slightly longer than a single episode. In Season 2's first and second episode, it is set up that the planet's fall would be closer to the game's depiction of events rather than the novels, to the extent of name-dropping locations from the early parts of Halo Reach, such as Visegrad and Sword Base, and incorporating them into the plot. However, when Chief and Silver Team go to Visegrad Relay, setting up that they would fill Noble Team's role in this version of Reach, they just get stopped by some random Oni characters, whose only purpose in the entire show seems to be to act as an obstacle for the Chief multiple times. Then everything gets delayed. Also, the ending of Episode 2 is where it is revealed that the most hated character from the first season and got brought back instead of just being a vision to Chief, with no explanation through the entire season. Meanwhile, it is referenced off-screen that Spartan Team Cobalt was ambushed by elites present on the planet, and Ackerson states that major leaders like himself and Parangoski are immediately abandoning Reach and taking important equipment like Silver Team's Mjolnir. All because of a few elites on the planet. This plot point could have at least made some sense if there was a fleet comparable to the one in the novels, also approaching Reach that the characters knew about, or even if the viewer was informed of what type of battle scenario Ackerson was requesting for Cortana to simulate. Also, there is a comparison point to this in the main canon, with Parangoski being willing to use the planet as bait to draw in the Covenant in the expanded and retconned version of Operation Red Flag, and that was made to help fit into Halo Reach and Halo the Fall of Reach better. Yet it is referenced by Admiral Stanforth, the other character in this piece of lore, or that using Reach would be a terrible idea due to the planet's importance. And Red Flag only goes ahead with using Reach after the Covenant had been detected on the planet for weeks, with there even being a reference to the destruction of the Long Night of Solace. Back to the show itself, it is not until the end of episode 3 where the battle actually starts, and going into episode 4, the action initially feels like scenes from a generic alien invasion film, and throughout the episode, the Spartans never fight using Mjolnir in the entire episode, even though that would have been an obvious selling point in the marketing, and would make the action scenes 10 times cooler than they are currently, as they are some of the few good things about the show. Although it makes sense that Master Chief and Risotto 8 would not be in their armour at the start of the episode, given where they were at the end of the previous one. And even then, they don't even get regular marine armour or any form of protection, which led to this headline once the episode actually aired. In the initial action scenes, it feels like the planet is on pause for wherever the characters aren't, as Chief goes from an area filled with destruction and mayhem to an area where everyone is going about their business without any concern or knowledge of what is going on. And the following quiet moments, such as the one in the antiques shop, don't feel like there's the urgency or concern that there should be in this sort of situation. Oh yeah, and then there's also the moment in one of the street fight scenes where there is a blind ex-Spartan using a grenade launcher. I know that Spartan augmentations are very powerful, but that does not give them daredevil powers. Then another one of the dumbest moments in the Fall of Reach episode was how casually the Covenant were able to get Cortana. You could argue that this is explained in later episodes by being part of another idiotic plan to get intel about the Covenant, but this could have been implied in the episode by making it be something harder to achieve than Mackie just picking up Cortana's data chip in a seemingly abandoned facility. Then, without the context of later episode, it gets even dumber, given how one of the earliest pieces of lore for the wider universe, established by Combat Evolved, and repeatedly referenced in other stories, is how humanity maintained the secrecy of Earth and other planets from the Covenant through the Cole Protocol, with one aspect of it stating that
destruction or capture of a shipboard AI is absolutely unacceptable.
Which was why Cortana was given to Chief in the film. On the Covenant side, there is very little to speak of, since most of the combat consists of elites, sometimes with active camo, sometimes without, charging at random people, along with there being a single way through one scene. Then the elites also operate like tamed versions of brutes for the sake of the show's ratings, or with how they just charge in with little regard for strategy or even self-preservation. Within the actual base, jackals and elites are the only species seen in the fight, with jackals using the energy daggers from Halo Reach for some reason, and which gives them no ranged ability, and the only protection being their traditional energy shields. This point also leads into one of the dumb moments of the episode, as the writers decided to get rid of keys before the story even gets to the Halo ring, in an end that's inferior and much more basic than the version seen in Combat Evolved. After this point, as the episode gets to its conclusion, the main characters are cornered into a last stand scenario by the Arbiter's forces, and the Chief gets ready to fight him one-on-one. Only for Chief to then get knocked down by an overcharged plasma pistol shot, which in turn leads for the only time that the elites actually feel like living beings instead of a hive mind or robots, as you see the plasma pistol elite flinch as he realises he screwed up before the Arbiter swings at him. Yet somehow, despite Plasma being shown pretty consistently to be able to one-shot humans in this show, the Chief is somehow fine despite it not wearing armour, but is only saved by the surprise appearance of McKee. Then after episode 4 ends, there's one action scene to continue where it's left off, which also sees the only appearance of a brute in not only the battle, but in Season 2 generally. But once it's over, Reach is abandoned entirely by the narrative. No reference to what happened to other active Spartans, if they were even on Reach at the time, or if all the Spartans got their armour confiscated, or if it was just a silver team. No last stand and to achieve a specific objective, no space battle, roughly half of the major Covenant species missing, no Covenant vehicles except one Wraith, etc. The only context that we get for the state of the orbital battle are a reference to the orbital platforms almost like they were on Reach each in the core timeline, even though we don't see any form of response to that objective, and that there are enough ships to start classing the planet at the start of the next episode. Then the other half of the season focuses on the Chief going rogue for what feels like the 117th time over the course of both seasons, and for another revenge quest, along with making awful adaptations of the Spartan 3 program and the Flood. Oh, and we finally get to a Halo ring, in the penultimate episode of the second season of a TV show called Halo. Also, this isn't necessarily related to the Fall of Reach specifically, but the show continues to present Master Chief as an unhinged maniac for some reason, especially when it comes to him trying to prove that the Covenant are on Reach, to the point where, as the viewer, I know he's right, but I don't want him to be. And then I was cheering on Kai when she was beating the hell out of him in the second half of the season. To conclude, which do I think is best? Well, let's get the obvious out of the way with first. Much like everything else it attempts to do, the version seen in the Halo show is just plain awful for the reasons of incompetence I've already listed, as it's generic in its visuals and a combination of absurd and brain-dead in its writing. So, now it's down to the game versus the novel. As much as I like Halo Reach and Noble Team, aside from Emil, I don't think it's the strongest of Bungie's Halo games in terms of the story, as there are several inconsistencies that would still apply even when limited to just the games. Primarily, several cases of time jumps that just feel arbitrary, with the most notable being the gap between the missions Sword Base and Nightfall, then the fact it somehow takes over a week for an injured Noble 6 to walk from the Long Night of Solace crash site to New Alexandria. However, when it regards the moments that matter for stuff like atmosphere and emotion, the game really gets things right, and when looking at the final levels, you can't deny that Bungie's Halo games went out regardless of whether you play through them in chronological order to end with the triumphant Warthog run, or in release order to end with the sombre last stand of Noble 6. Yet, even though there are things that I wish had been highlighted at any point, such as why half of Delta Red seemed to just leave the match midway through First Strike without explanation, I think the novels depict the battle best. The author, Eric Nyland, knew what to focus on and how much time to dedicate to it, which is something to admire given how much stuff all of his Halo books cover.